Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio number 33, your first red pill moment. I am your host, Brian Martinez, this time, and I am joined by the Honey Badgers. So let me introduce who's here. Briefly, we have Anna Cherry. Say hi, Anna.
Say hi, Anna.
We have Hannah Wallen.
Hello.
We have Karen. Say what's up, Karen.
I'm not here. I'm not here right now. Just everybody move along. Nothing to see.
So it's actually, this is Lauren Southern using Karen's account.
I'm looking at you, Karen.
Accidentally logged on as Lauren Southern.
Yeah, well, she left her account open in my other browser.
And lastly, we have Theron Meyer. Hi, Theron.
Hello. Hey, guys.
All right. Oh, and Allison's here too, but she's doing stuff in the background. But she's here, totally. All right, so before we get into our individual red pill moments and useful resources for noobs that are new to this whole phenomenon, this whole movement, we're going to start with a little bit of news. Who has the news story? Is it Hannah? I
have the news story.
Okay,
I just
sweet.
have to switch windows here.
Okay.
I have like 8 windows open. Not quite that many, but...
Do you guys think we should mention the thing that just happened with Hillary Clinton?
I don't see why not, especially
What
since
just happened?
we just kind of did.
Okay, yeah, we should. That would be the first ones. Karen, what was it that
Karen's gonna have to
happened?
describe
Yeah,
that.
Karen, you gotta tell us about that.
Oh, geez. Let me see if I can't find it again. Oh, damn it. I've lost it.
Okay, you can look for it, and I'll.
Okay, Man Boobs is going to totally cherry pick that. Karen Strawn admits that she's lost it.
Yeah. Okay. An anonymous woman at a campaign event asked Hillary Clinton, "You say that all rape victims should be believed, but what would you say? Would you say that about Juanita Broderick, Kathleen Willey, and Paula Jones? Should we believe them as well?"
Fucking glorious. And what was Hillary's response?
She said, I think everyone should be believed until the evidence shows otherwise," or something like that.
That they should be disbelieved based on evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, she basically just admitted that she thinks that all men accused of sexual violence are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, until
And
the evidence shows that they're not guilty.
And then on top of that, based on Juanita Broderick's accusation, there really wasn't evidence either way. There was no evidence of guilt or innocence that was definitive, that you could point to and say this is a smoking gun. There was circumstantial evidence on both sides. So apparently, by Hillary's standards, her husband is a rapist. By Hillary's standards.
Dun dun dun.
So here's the thing that I was thinking, I'm taking away from this, that I think is most interesting. Do you think that the fact that this woman, this anonymous woman who stood up and asked this question, could be seen or pointed to as evidence that I think the common person is really getting tired of all of this sort of feminist rhetoric, and that they're actually starting to, maybe, I don't know, maybe this stuff's getting to them, maybe people are starting to be more skeptical of these sorts of things, they're not falling for this shit?
I don't know. It sounded, just from her tone, she actually sounded more like she was a feminist who was asking from the perspective of, I believe all these women should be believed and you obviously don't, and therefore I have a problem with you being a hypocrite in this way and not really being feminist enough. So unless I see something to show me that that it is indeed someone who's challenging the feminist narrative rather than somebody who is scolding a feminist for not being feminist enough, I don't know.
She might have been, but she might also have been a Republican that managed to get in there, because this is something that Republicans have been saying for 20 years about Hillary. Because the believe the woman rhetoric of feminism has been around for about 50 years, at least, and at least it's been allowed for about 50 years. And when the Lewinsky scandal first hit, that was one of the first things that came out of Republican pundits. Was here we have all these feminists who are throwing these women under the bus because they're not.
Because Bill will go to the bat for them over abortion.
Over abortion. Because they're challenging, they're not accusing a Republican man. And there was a big slap fight. I don't know if people remember this, but there was a huge slap fight over sexual misconduct in Washington because of the Clinton scandals. That like the news media started trying to dig up dirt on every Republican, and the Democrats started trying to dig up dirt on every Republican in Congress, and the Republican news media started trying to dig up dirt on every Democrat in Congress, and there were all these little mini scandals that happened at the same time, and it was like it was this free-for-all sex scandal slap fight between the two political parties during the 90s because of the Clinton scandals. So I mean, it wasn't like this stuff didn't get talked about before. What this woman's question was, it wasn't a new question. It just happens to be a question that she was able to ask to a candidate for presidential. Well, not presidential election, but the nominee to run for president, rather than the wife of a sitting president or former president. And now Hillary's actually running for president, or running to be nominated to run for president. It's a different ballgame asking her that now. She can't just defend her husband. She has to try to straddle all the various political positions that she has taken over the years. And considering there's such a variety of them, I hope she has long legs.
Cherry?
Hello. I thought I was muted, but I guess I wasn't. Oops. Sorry. Because I was looking up and that wasn't muted, and then I looked down on my mic remote control. That wasn't muted, and wow. Okay. I'll be better about that in the future. Sorry. So, yeah, I have an interesting thing about all that. I'll go back to the presidential thing later, but as you may or may not know, there's been kind of a recent hubbub about a performer in the adult industry potentially being a scummy person, and
James Dean.
So this potentially scummy person,
okay,
who's also on my no list before even interacting with the person, because it's like, look, this is somebody who built his career and his whole persona on being forceful and violent in his sex acts, and in fact, both of his girlfriends, Joanna Angel and Stoya, were attracted to his aggressive way of having sex. So once you have a person who's not only that way, perhaps naturally, and then is also rewarded for that, and then is also sought after because of that. So if you have a guard dog that you train to be a guard dog, and you feed it every time it bites, and then you're like, oh my God, it bit me. Well, what the fuck? Okay, whatever. That whole thing aside, thing is, we are paying a lot of attention as a society on personality and persona and things like that, and I just kind of miss the days when merit was all that mattered, when it was, obviously I realize when somebody's a scummy person and they do something bad, you like want to alert other people in your life or in their life and be like, hey, don't hang out with this person, they're kind of terrible and bad things will happen. But for the most part, it used to be this kind of, I guess people used to be able to take care of themselves in their personal life, just like personal life was personal, and it wasn't like the biggest thing that everybody always talked about. So it used to be actually that we looked at however somebody was performing as a politician or as a ruler of a website editor, whatever they are, and that was the thing that mattered. And their personal life, like he cheated on his wife, like the Italian president. Like in France, nobody fucking cares. In France and in Italy, yeah, the prime ministers cheat on their wives, and the wives probably have boyfriends. Who the fuck cares? Why are we making somebody's personal life? Why is court of public opinion over somebody's personage the important thing now? And that kind of goes back to the presidential thing, where that is actually something that happened during the aristocratic times of Louis the Eighth and whatever. There's specifically information about the king's personal life and his affairs, and the scandalous stuff of that personal nature was released and given to the commoners to talk about. And then they would not pay attention to what the king was doing in terms of his laws and the wars and whatever other things that people may not want happening. They weren't paying attention to that because they were so caught up in the drama and the reality TV of the court's private life. And we kind of have that today. But going back to the accusations over somebody and the whole believe until it's disproven, you have to realize that everything is court of public opinion now. Your personage and the way people think about you and what they say about you, reputation or whatever, is one of the only things that matters. And not just reputation of a true kind, but like what people may correctly or incorrectly or spitefully or not say about you. It's a very high school, like Facebook gossip kind of court of public opinion and reputation thing. So the believe women idea just by itself, like no matter what, believe women, that literally means guilty, not just guilty until proven innocent, but it means guilty and nothing can ever prove innocence. That's the thing. Until you have a lot of people coming out, as have happened in this particular case, and I can explain why, it's probably true, but when you have just one person say something, just one single accusation, that is enough for most everyone to completely write somebody off and shatter their entire career and everything. So the idea of believe women at its base is really fucked up and does not give the other person an equal representation or semblance of justice or anything other than just getting completely fucked over. My only question is to things like that, and this really relates to the red pill thing, is what would the situation be if the genders were reversed? Just look at that. And if you would still behave the same way as you do now when the genders are reversed, then it's probably okay. But if you'd behave differently based on the genders, then you got a fucking problem, my friend.
And the one thing I will say is I don't think numbers make accusations more credible. And I used to think it did. I mean, I used to have that misconception until I started thinking back to I don't know how many of you have ever been to a revival or a like a church camp that has something at the end of the week that's like a revival. Now, numbers and evidence together, yes, Anna, that's different. But in fact, I would say evidence only. Numbers are irrelevant. And here's why. Like I said about the revivals, you go to a revival, you get a situation going where there's a sermon and people are in a mood and people are talking about the same thing, you know, or thinking about the same thing, and they ask for testimonials. And people start getting up and making their little testimony about, you know, I used to be this terrible person and then I was saved, you know, or I used to do these unhealthy things and then Jesus talked me out of it, you know, or whatever. And it's not always a bad thing. It's not always stupid, but there are plenty of instances, and I would liken this very much to take back the night rallies as well. There are plenty of instances where people will get up and confess basically to lifestyle choices and unhealthy behaviors and all kinds of shit that it's basically a false confession so that they can give a testimonial because everybody else is giving a testimonial. They want to be part of the moment and part of the feeling, you know, basically getting caught up in this fervor. And the same thing happens during anything that can be labeled a witch hunt. It happened during the original witch trials. It happened during McCarthy era. It happens anytime there is a situation where people are getting attention that is positive for basically confessing to having experienced a common experience with other people that are talking about it. And this is like this is no different, to me. I've seen it multiple times in past news events where some guy gets accused by one woman, and then all of a sudden there are several other women that come out of the woodwork and give identical or near identical stories, and then some of their stories start to fall apart because timelines or because location and other details don't match. It's a matter of people coming out and wanting to be part of the wave. And so I can never just look at numbers and say, well, gosh, if this many people are saying it, it must be true. Because people have a tendency to bandwagon these types of things, and it's not really evidence when that's the case.
I would have to say I agree with that, and honestly, I'm more interested in the pattern of behavior. Because we've seen this, Hugo Schweitzer, Kyle Payne, Gian Gomeshi, Hart Nooker, and now James Dean. All of these are extremely, extremely feminist men, right, who have been accused of this kind of sexual misconduct. And it's really hard for me to say, oh, and Hannibal the Victor on YouTube and people like that. It's really hard for sometimes to parse between the hysteria around sexual misconduct among feminists, right? And whether they're sort of crying wolf on a big wolf crying bandwagon, or whether there's actually something to it. But in these cases, it seems like there actually may be something to it. And as Anna said, a guy has a sort of a history of liking a particular style of dominant sex, and I have no problems, and I would have no problems working with somebody who was like that sexually, unless they considered themselves a feminist, because it just seems they don't go together. And so, I mean, like, I left a comment on a post about this on Reddit, that I think the feminist narrative would really appeal to sexually predatory men. A rapist gets to hear that his behavior is normalized, as in normal and not pathological. He'll hear about how weak and vulnerable are to men like him. He'll observe the overblown sort of expressiveness of vulnerability of the feminists themselves, who can be crushed by things like the word bossy. He'll hear about how he'll probably get away with it. He'll hear about he as a man is superior to women, even if only in how society perceives him. He will hear how rare it is for women to report when they've been victimized, and about how often they're too terrified to fight back when they're being assaulted. He'll hear how it's not him to blame for his behavior, but rather a pervasive and systemic culture of toxic masculinity that's been imposed on him, right? That's a lot of stuff to be telling somebody with tendencies toward being sexually predatory, telling him about how his behavior is not abhorrent, it's normal, it's normalized, it's endorsed by the culture, you're just doing what men do, and on top of that, you'll get away with it. Right? If I were a rapist, I'd do nothing but hang out with feminists. So, yeah.
That was
and
really
I'm not
awesome.
making a comment on this particular case, other than that, if it were me, and I were in porn, I would also say no to any man, working with any man who has a very, very extremely dominant style of sex and then of performance, and at the same time was a good feminist.
Well, I'd like to point about that, but yeah, it's not just one. Like, sometimes he's dominant. It seems to be one of those not talked about subtle. Like, a lot of people have sex through basically almost no communication. It's entirely body language and implied things and things like that. So rarely, I guess, you will have, unless you're a complete entertainer who approaches it from that perspective, people will just kind of do their natural thing and mesh together however, and whatever chemistry naturally happens. So it's like kind of a blind process. And it seemed like a lot of, all of JD's work was very much just that persona, that one thing, and it looked like it was spontaneous to the point of enjoyment of a lot of the models and directors. That's why he rose to prominence so quickly, because he had a way of having this dominant persona that brings out interesting because interactions on camera, because it's impromptu. It is something that happens on set that's not necessarily talked about beforehand. Obviously, people give their limits on porn sets, as in, like, I will not do anal, this is a no, that is a no. However, sometimes people will change their mind in the middle of a activity to the point of wanting to try something. And how is the other person supposed to know if you're up for something unless they initiate or start going in that direction? And then if you let them, then they're like, oh, so that's cool. That's how majority of human interactions and sexual interaction happens. Everything, for the most part, once you get past a certain point, is nonverbal communication and body language and trial and error, gray zone, where you have to, like, find ways in which you fit together, and you do that by bumping into each other until you find all the right fittings. And I'm not just describing sex, I mean, like, all the personal desires. And so a lot of his activity on camera and on a screen, and what prompted, freaking hundreds of, not hundreds, but it prompted civilian, like, normal girls to tattoo to-do list James Dean onto their skin, because they really appreciated this kind of dangerous, dominant, almost very aggressive kind of behavior. And a lot of girls really are into BDSM and kinky, like, painful things. Not me personally. That's why it would be on a no list, because I would not want to put myself in a situation where somebody routinely engages in activity that is physically evocative, like hurtful, and I'm not into that. But a lot of girls that I know are, both in the cam girl industry and the porn industry and just, like, real life industry, like Tumblr, the porn Tumblr anyway. There's a variety of women that are very outspoken about the fact that they are interested in that dangerous, kinky aspect, the BDSM, the Christian Grey, for Christ's sake, the 50 Shades of Grey. How many copies did it sell? How many hundreds of thousands of women are reading that and loving it? Normal, like, soccer moms. So that's a thing that a lot of people appreciate, and so a lot of it was impromptu and on camera while the reel was rolling. So it's like, that's just something that he did. That's acting. That's sexual acting. That was his thing.
Boundaries are being pushed and decisions are being made in real time.
Yes. And they're photographing that, and people actually enjoy that because that's closer to real sex than porn used to be. The fake Hollywood porn, like, this is better, and people liked it because it did have that element of real life thing that you do in real life, which is you have boundaries.
It was an edge to it.
Yeah, the feminist thing, though, that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
He never specifically called himself a feminist until very recently, and perhaps quick point to the other thing, both specifically Joanne Angel, who was just starting out in porn, and Stoya, who's already a veteran in porn, both have said things to the effect of, and Joanne Angel directly saying that she liked this aggressive dangerousness that he portrayed in sex. So that's why she wanted to be with him. So okay, just let that rest. The feminist thing, real quick, I think he was dating Stoya at the time, who is, God bless her, and I do love her, and she calls herself a feminist, which is unfortunate because up until very recently she didn't believe a lot of their ideas because she was a sex worker and discriminated against by, basically a lot of women and feminists. But she still believes in female empowerment, so she definitely carried the flag of feminism a lot. And I think they were dating when he said this in an interview, which was, I am not a feminist. People are people. Some people are assholes that are women. Some people are assholes that are men. I like to see people be happy and have consent and blah, blah, blah. So I guess, if that makes me a feminist, then I guess I am a fucking feminist. And so that was the thing. But then he was also hanging out with Stoya, and he seemed to have been very deferential to older and other, established, women in porn industry in general. So he had this kind of like, boy next door. He jokes that he's, the Jew boy next door. So he kind of had this non-threatening persona, I guess.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Ryan Reynolds.
He definitely has that Van Wilder thing going on.
Yeah,
so he has that in the sense that it's kind of a gynocentric, more gynocentric type person, or more into female empowerment type person. So because of that, I think, and hanging out with these feminists and then saying, maybe I am a fucking feminist in an interview, that was cemented his feminist identity. And I think what honestly happened, feminists just wanted to tell the world finally that they do watch porn, and since he used the word feminism somewhere in conjunction with his beliefs, they're like, oh my god, we can finally talk about that we watch porn because this guy said he was a feminist. This is great. That's likely what happened because he barely mentioned it, and it was only once. But obviously, I think he acted like a feminist more.
Oh yeah, no, and you know, Jezebel was crowing about him, and you know, like it's essentially he was like the darling of a whole bunch of feminist feminist authors, and you know, the Jezebel, Vice, The Guardian, Bustle, The Frisky, BuzzFeed, right? All of these people were, you know, essentially cementing his feminist credentials by praising him for his progressiveness. So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on to the story. So, Hannah, you were going to get the story. You ready?
Okay, yes, I've got the story is ready and waiting here.
Let's do it.
Headline: Women's group demands re-victimization of wrongful imprisonment victim. Ivan Henry is in the final legal stages of a long nightmare, one that began with his arrest for suspected sexual assault in 1982. Wrongfully convicted of 10 counts of sexual assault in 1983, Mr. Henry was declared a dangerous offender and given an indeterminate sentence. He spent 27 years in prison, maintaining his innocence the entire time, before evidence surfaced that called his conviction into question. Soon after, he was allowed the appeal he had sought for years. A variety of evidence led to the Crown's eventual decision. Evidence had been uncovered during a political review of old sex crimes cases, or a police review of old sex crimes cases, which implicated another man in the crimes Mr. Henry was convicted of committing. A key witness appeared to have tailored her testimony based on an inappropriate relationship with the lead detective in the case. Identification was made after her first interview with that detective, using a lineup the defense says was designed to bias the witness. Exculpatory evidence had been withheld from the defense during the process. Semen found on several of the victims did not match Mr. Henry's blood type. His conviction was quashed and he was released. However, no compensation was offered to make up for his years of wrongful imprisonment. Instead, he had to file a civil suit, which two defendants, the City of Vancouver and the federal government, have settled, leaving only the provincial government defending against it. Now, after the 1983 conviction has been deemed wrongful by the court, representatives of some of his accusers have tried to rehash the question of his innocence by demanding the right to bring arguments against it into his compensation hearing. British Columbia Supreme Court Chief Justice Christopher Hinkson castigated representatives of Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter with a statement demanding that Mr. Henry's innocence, or reminding them that Mr. Henry's innocence is not in question, and there's no place in the case being tried to insert arguments over it. The Vancouver Sun quotes Justice Hinkson's stated opinion. The term busybody is an unfortunate one that is more pejorative than I consider necessary. While I don't wish to minimize the important work of the applicant, I am unable to find the applicant's work includes intervening in cases of claims for charter damages by the wrongfully convicted. Rape Relief spokeswoman Louisa Russell responded by telling employers that despite the original trial and the hearing to determine Mr. Henry's factual innocence, victims, quote, did not have an opportunity to be heard, and they will now seek other platforms to speak, end quote. She presented the request to subject the traumatized wrongful conviction victim to yet another series of arguments over his innocence or guilt as a favor to the public, as if the extensive coverage of the case weren't enough. Final arguments in the compensation trial will begin Monday, without the input or influence of Rape Relief.
Thank God. They wanted to write an amicus brief. They wanted to submit an amicus brief regarding the validity of this man's factual innocence in essentially in relation to this particular case of.
Well, they also wanted a friend of the court appointed.
Yeah, whether the province owed him compensation because they felt that his factual innocence had not been demonstrated to the degree that it should have been, right? Even though there was no evidence linking him to the crimes, and all of the evidence linked somebody else to the crimes. So, yeah. Feminists are just... they can't leave anything alone. I mean, and this particular case just goes to show you, like why you have things like the Enliven Project, where they have those rows upon rows of little stick men, and there's like 2 little ones down at the bottom corner, and then there's like 7 who went to prison, and there's 14 who were brought to trial, right, and the whole bit, and all of the rest in the middle who are they're all guilty too, right? And they never actually put one of those little the black stick men, the dark ones that are dark because they represent these false accusations. They never put one of those up there in amongst the convicted. They didn't even think to do that, right? They think that all falsely accused men none of them will get, in their graphic, none of the falsely accused men ever end up going to court, right, being prosecuted, and they never end up being convicted. So, of course, and all of those other ones, other than those 2 out of 100, right, that are definitely provably false accusations, all of the other ones are just as true as the ones who were convicted and the ones who were prosecuted but were acquitted, right? All of those men are guilty, right? Except just those 2. Those 2 that can prove, but with video evidence, right? Or because they were wearing an ankle bracelet and were, in the next town when their wife, beat herself up and then called police or whatever and said, oh, he sexually assaulted me. Like what happened with, was it Joel Kirk? Or was it Gordon? No, it was Gordon Smith. They finally arrested his wife. Finally, after 13 false accusations that led to 8 arrests, they finally arrested her when they could not get away with not arresting her, because after unconstitutionally requiring him to wear an ankle bracelet to track his whereabouts, because even though all of the charges against him had been dropped, there were no charges that stuck. They still required him to wear an ankle bracelet, and then she called police, injured, from the emergency room and said he had just attacked her, and he was way the fuck elsewhere at the time. Right? That would be evidence. That would be considered evidence of a false accusation. Nothing less than that would be considered evidence of a false accusation to these feminists. This man has been deemed innocent. Another man is implicated in these crimes, but they still believe he's guilty. Anyhow, Hannah, go ahead. Or Theron, go ahead.
This might seem a little bit off topic, but I just want to speak to the point of how feminists can't leave anything alone and how they're such busybodies. And I was experiencing that this week because I've been doing a research paper for my film studies class, and I'm researching the role of government in cinema in the Weimar Republic in like 1920s Germany. And so I search in the SFU database like keywords like economy, Weimar Republic, film industry, and then I get stuff like class and gender anxieties in Weimar nutritional discourse. And literally every third hit that I get is a journal article or a book about feminism in the Weimar Republic or gender relations in the Weimar Republic. And then I go to the SFU library and every second book is about gender in Germany, and feminism and women's role in this and that and the other thing. And I'm just like, it's so inescapable. These people are such busybodies, and it just makes me feel like they're either extremely monomaniacal or just really selfish and solipsistic, that they are willing to spend every single second of their life doing this stuff. And yeah, I was just really frustrated this week with that, because it really gets in the way of getting good research done, because every second or third journal article is about nothing at all that I want it to be about. And that topic is usually feminism or gender.
But remember, Theron, patriarchy silences women.
That is frustrating. I've run into that as well. The worst is trying to find research on the experiences of male victims of intimate partner and sexual violence, because you have to wade through all of this tripe. It's mostly blog posts, and it's not even research unless you go to Google Scholar, and then you get research. But even there, it's a lot of times it's buried under minutia, research into minutia from a feminist perspective that excludes men entirely, except as the perpetrators. And they can't leave anything alone, and they cannot have anything not be all about them. And I think that's kind of part of what...
They're the real colonialists, because they colonize every single fucking field and topic and subtopic. They colonize it and they take it over. They're the real colonialists.
Appropriation. And it's true. They do everything. And you cannot have a topic that you discuss without feminists making it a feminist topic. Even science, even hard sciences, there's now feminist biology, of all stupid things. Feminist physics. I think if we actually start relying on feminist physics, everything will fall apart. Because I'm sure that like structure is patriarchal. But I wanted to... What were you saying?
At my university called feminist research. How to research like a feminist.
Oh my God, how to research like a feminist. I'm sure that's probably similar to how to drive like a drunk. But the other thing I wanted to touch on is what Karen was saying about accusations and
it should be called feminists. How to get what you're looking for.
That what Karen was talking about, accusations and feminists and proof of innocence and everything. I'm going to go back to the same story I reference all the time. The 7 Years in Hell. 7 Years in Hell is an article I wrote for A Voice for Men. And if you just look up A Voice for Men and 7 Years in Hell together on Google, you should be able to find it. But and I think it's spelled out SEVEN, not the number 7, because it's a headline. But one of the things that happened to the victim in that case, his ex, one of the accusations that she made was rape. She accused him. She went to a detective to give her story. Her story didn't pan out because he had physical evidence that he was elsewhere at the time. The detective then took another story from her because she changed the time and date. Oh, well, I was mistaken. It didn't happen that day. It happened this day. Well, he had physical evidence to prove that, too. You know, we had been at that, by that time we were monitoring him, and he was keeping things like receipts and you know, going to places where there were cameras so that he could prove where he actually was and what he was actually doing at any given time. And so when the second story didn't pan out, we were sure that the detective would drop the case. No. The detective took a third story with more detail changes and was going to continue to pursue the case until the victim's lawyer finally persuaded the county prosecutor to tell the detective to drop it because he wasn't going to prosecute that case. And it took threatening to sue for harassment because the victim was clearly innocent. The accuser was continually changing her story, and she was changing details that, it's impossible for her to have been that mistaken.
It's like Jackie saying initially, I was forced to give oral sex to 5 guys, to her friends, and then when she told Rolling Stone magazine, it was I was held down, I was thrown through a glass coffee table and gang raped on a pile of broken glass. Two completely.
Well, it actually would be like if Jackie said it happened on December 15th at 5 o'clock to Rolling Stone, and then Rolling Stone investigated and found out that there was no party on December 15th at 5 o'clock, and she said, "Oh, I was wrong. It was December 12th at 9 o'clock." And then they investigated again and found out, nope, there was no party there. And she went and gave another story, and Rolling Stone was going to continue reporting it until an editor said, "No, you can't do that." That would be the same case, and that's what happened.
Hannah, you know what they were doing? They were waiting for you to find. They're trying to find a spot.
To find a time when he couldn't account for his whereabouts.
Yeah, that's all they were doing. And
we had already figured that out by now.
That.
Yeah, we'd already figured that out by now. Or by that time, we'd already figured that out from previous accusations. There were some accusations that this woman made that were like the proof against them made the accusation ridiculous, not just false. Like, she claimed that he attacked her and she kicked him in the nuts 3 times, and then he ran away. And the day that she said that all happened, he was recovering from hernia surgery. So a man recovering from hernia surgery was supposed to have gotten kicked in the nuts 3 times by a woman who was like 5'10" and weighed well over 200 pounds, and then just run. Because, you can always run after getting kicked in the nuts, much less after hernia surgery. And there were things like that. She turned in evidence to the court that was demonstrably false, including a tape of like from an answering machine, of a phone call that she claimed was him, and when they listened to the tape, it was clearly not his voice. Not just, maybe not his voice, but very different from his voice and very different from his accent and everything. So, this was like, and the court continued to allow this, and the prosecutor continued to prosecute, and the police continued to arrest, and this spanned 2 counties and went on for 7 years. To hear more about it, like I said, read that story, 7 Years in Hell, but be prepared to become very angry when you read it.
Oh, well, it really is like the Gordon Smith case and the Joel Kirk case. You can read about those on A Voice for Men as well. Mm-hmm. The Coyote Shivers case with Polly Perrette. There's so many cases of these women, and it really is toxic women. It's not all women are going to do this, but they have been given this set of tools. It's like a set of weaponized institutions and structures and systems that seem specifically designed to be abused by certain women who are toxic. And all you need is to put your foot wrong with one of these particular women, and oh my goodness, in the case of Mr. Henry, there was an inappropriate relationship between one of the complainants and the investigating officer. Well, guess what? In the whole Steph Guthrie, Greg Allen Elliott case, there's a friendly, very friendly professional relationship between one of the original complainants and the chief investigating officer in the case. Wouldn't you know it?
Yeah, okay, a couple things. There's some questions that I saw go through the chat. No perjury charges were ever brought. Perjury charges do not get brought against women in cases like this very often. Especially, like, this woman was being represented by a local domestic violence victims advocacy agency, and there is a thing in the Violence Against Women Act that provides for a representative that goes to court with the accuser and convinces the court on the accuser's behalf that the accuser is, this poor innocent victim, or bullies the court into treating the accuser that way regardless of evidence. And this is a situation where there cannot be, according to policy that is encouraged by the law, there cannot be repercussions for this behavior under the Violence Against Women Act. That law just basically needs to be reformed in order to prevent this kind of abuse, because it is literally designed to facilitate it.
Yeah, no, and
every step of the way. And it's not just the advocate. There is police training that goes into this. There is training in the court system for judges and bailiffs and everybody in the courts. Even the clerk of courts gets training to teach the clerk of courts to presume accusers honest and the accused guilty in domestic violence cases. Mm-hmm. And in situations like this one, where it becomes obvious and everybody's tired of what's going on, they can't do anything about it because policy demands that they facilitate everything that she does. So that was the first question. The second question was, no, she wasn't banging anybody. This bias is just built in. It's not something that, like, nobody was getting any favors from anybody to be biased this way. They were basically just doing what they are now told is their job. Yep. And there were instances near the end where the side of the case, the innocent side of the case, the victim's family was told, we don't know what else to do by people in authority. We can't do anything about this. There is nothing we can do. We can't go after her for perjury, even though we have an ironclad perjury case. If we go after her for perjury, the agency in question will crucify us.
Yeah.
And judges can't do anything because those agencies will then campaign against them for re-election. Prosecutors can't do anything for the same reason, and that's if they don't bring action against them. It took filing a case against the accuser after they had 8 inches of paperwork from these court cases. It took filing a case of vexatious litigation against her with proof from that case and other cases involving her to put a stop to her continued use of the court system. And it still didn't stop the drama. It just dampened it down to a manageable level.
Good grief. All right, Allison has spoken. She says we need to move on to the show topic.
All right. So the show topic is first red pill moment. Who wants to break the glass on that bitch?
Not me.
I'm gonna give it to Allison then. Allison, do you want to do it? No, not yet.
Well, no.
Okay, you know what?
Well, you said break the glass.
We'll start. Yeah, we'll start with Hannah since we're breaking the glasses.
And I think we've also sort of it's a good segue because that is, I think, a big part of Hannah's red pill story.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I just gave there is a big part of my red pill story. Let me open up the doc that has this. My red pill. When we talk about the red pill moment, everybody talks about having a red pill moment. I didn't have a moment. I had a slow drip. There wasn't a specific time when I went from complete ignorance on like a completely gynocentric perspective on human rights to an egalitarian one. I can't remember a time when I didn't know that being a girl gave me some privileges boys didn't have, like the taboo against boys hitting girls, even if girls hit first. In fact, I once defended my first boyfriend against a group of girls at the park who were poking and slapping at him for the apparent crime of co-opting the girl color pink. And they all felt quite superior knowing he couldn't hit them back. But they ran like a bunch of cackling hens when they found out I would. I was also blissfully aware unaware of a lot. I mean, growing up as a kid, you don't always see, like feminists will tell you privilege is invisible, and I can agree with that from the perspective of female privilege being invisible. It would take all night for me to explain my journey from seeing cleverness instead of sexism in a t-shirt I had in elementary school that paraphrased the song anything you can do, I can do better from Annie Get Your Gun by replacing you with boys and I with girls, to getting called a special snowflake by man boobs for telling Reddit's men's rights subreddit that self-titled gamer girls need to man up or find another hobby. Instead, I can tell you how I woke up to the scope of the problem in the legal system and what that meant to me. When I first started seeing the men in my life encounter it, I honestly believed it was a local thing, possibly related to the same political ideology I embraced at the time. I came from an area where traditionalism and conservatism were fairly widespread, often going hand in hand. I figured that the local judges I'd seen ignoring female violence were traditionalist old conservative men who didn't know better than to put women on a pedestal and were therefore more inclined to believe a woman's denial of guilt than evidence presented against her. There were moments when I almost got the full dose, like when an advisor at the second university I attended talked me into putting my sexual history on a t-shirt, then hung it on a line with other t-shirts labeled as the stories of rape victims. All before the most emotionally draining rally I ever attended in my life. Take back the nights, advocates screamed at attendees like cheerleaders at a sporting event from hell. I never thought it wasn't mine to begin with. But I just thought these women were crazy extremists whose dumbassery would never amount to anything. Because what idiot would listen to a lot of shrieking banshees spouting rhetoric on a non-residential campus in the middle of the night? It took a series of such cases spanning 5 Ohio counties: Auglaize, Allen, Hancock, Montgomery, and Greene, the last 3 being decade-long nightmares, along with research into domestic violence law and victims advocacy to better understand those cases, before I finally grasped the situation. Reading the text of the Violence Against Women Act, which passed the year I learned about Take Back the Night, with knowledge of how it has been used against men in my life, well, that was an experience in and of itself. It's hard to describe how enraging it is to wade through that law in both its original form and its renewal incarnations, realize exactly what it was feminists did with it, and trace that all back to the way those men were treated in the system. I'm 43 years old. I've been a self-identified non-feminist for 30 years. I've debated gender issues online from an accountability as genderless standpoint, as long as I've had access. I became an active anti-feminist in the 80s when a pro-abortion activist threw pig shit in my face for marching in support of a bill that would have applied medical standards to abortion clinics. I became a father's rights activist at the end of the 90s when, due to the experiences of my husband and 2 other men close to us, I realized that discrimination against fathers in the family court system also wasn't just a local thing. I became a pushing back the rhetoric, argument-having, information-digging, fact-slinging men's rights activist when I realized the scope of the influence the feminist movement has had on law and policy and the effect that influence has on the lives of individual people, families, communities, and society as a whole. I didn't need to have a movement to help me understand that men's humanity is unequally recognized. I learned that over time as I grew up. My red pill, if you could call it a pill, was the realization of the scale of the attack on men's human rights. That by itself was enough to make me an activist. And if I had not cared when I began to understand how men and boys are affected by this, I'd have certainly been motivated once I realized what that spelled in terms of the direction Western civilization is headed. You can't decide half of humanity doesn't deserve equally recognized human rights without devaluing human rights in general. If gender can make a person disposable as a parent, parents can be deemed unnecessary. Any parent can be deemed disposable. If gender can make a person ineligible for recognition of due process rights, or bodily autonomy rights. Those rights can be deemed meaningless. Any authority can exempt itself from recognition of individual rights and freedoms by first gendering laws which tread on them, then after they are in place, using a slow process of updates and renewals to degender the text, while leaving the rights violations firmly in place to be inflicted on a society that has been slowly accustomed to sacrificing their rights for the illusion of security. Gynocentrism, exploited by ideologues, politicians, lawyers, and emotional snake oil sellers, like career victims advocacy professionals. It is turning our legal system into a massive train wreck that crushes those caught in its movement. If left unchecked, that wreck will only keep growing until it becomes unavoidable and inescapable. The only way to prevent that is if somebody fights to stop the train. And I only know one answer to a challenge like that. Aren't we somebody?
Wow, that was good. That was excellent. We are somebody, and we better fucking do it.
Well, the few, the brave, the bitchy.
All right, I guess I'm gonna go next. When I met my ex-husband, we were both working in Victoria, BC at a high-end hotel in the kitchen. He owned a trailer on 4 wooded acres about an hour and a half away. One day after he started working, shortly after he started working at the hotel, I overheard him talking to the guys on his shift, telling him that if a blonde woman with a British accent came in the kitchen looking for him through the back door, that they were just to step aside and let her through. Under no circumstances were they to interfere with her. Their safety was dependent on that. He would later tell me, when we got close to each other, that this woman had a history of extreme violence, and he'd lived with her for almost 2 years in that trailer outside of Duncan. He showed me scars on his arms that were still pink but fading from when she'd attacked him in a hotel bed with a knife after they'd had an evening of quarreling, and he'd left the house and gone to the hotel where he was working then to stay overnight. He showed me the set of expensive copper-bottomed cookware he'd purchased while he was still in culinary school, with all the handles broken off from her throwing them at him. When he'd met her, her husband was doing time for domestic assault, and she was what could only be described as a hot mess with 2 kids in tow. The urge to rescue is only human, and I think he believed going into their relationship that he thought he could show her a different way for men and women to be together. Eventually, he was forced to leave her, if only to keep himself out of prison. The first time the police were called to their home by the neighbors, he lived on 4 wooded acres, but they heard her, rather. He found himself face down in the dirt, covered in his own blood, with cuffs on and a cop's knee in his back, while she continued to scream and smash things inside the house. It was only when he managed to convey to the police that her children were inside, hiding in a closet, that they let him up and took her into custody. The children went into emergency care overnight because, though he had been living with her for a year and a half and was essentially their stepfather, he was still considered dangerous. She went into the drunk tank and was released 12 hours later without charges, and the children were released back into her care. He told me one night that it was when she had tried to kill him, another night when she'd tried to kill him, and he found himself with one hand around her neck and her back pinned against the wall, thinking, all I have to do is squeeze and I won't have to deal with any of this insanity anymore. That he made the decision that he had to leave her. For the first several months after he and I were together, we avoided spending any time in or around the communities and businesses she frequented, but she was still a shadow haunting his life. We'd go check on his property and mail every few days, and we'd almost always find his lock on the community mailbox broken and everything gone but the unstamped love letters she'd written him. Sometimes we'd find her dog inside the trailer, the mess of its urine and feces indicating it had been confined there for days, and the acreage for sale sign at the top of the driveway uprooted and discarded in the thickets of broom along the road. When we discovered I was pregnant, we decided to move far away. When the property finally sold, we were able to do that. And we lived in the northernmost communities of Vancouver Island for the duration of our marriage. I'm going to say here, my ex was not always a peach to live with. He was a very stubborn man with a quick temper, and he could only be described as fine when he was in a rage. He'd been in prison in his 20s for a violent assault on a superior officer when he was in the Air Force, a mutual fistfight that he'd taken too far. But for all of that, he had always considered any violence against a woman to be off limits. It simply was not done. There were moments when we were fighting that I wanted to hit him so badly I was nearly choking on it. But it was the understanding that his own hands were bound by that personal moral edict that always kept me from doing so. A man who will not hit back is every bit as defenseless as a man who cannot hit back. While I was married, and for some time after, I was close friends with a woman in my town. I have a lot of very, very good things to say about her. But there were still topics we mutually decided were off limits because we could neither agree nor disagree without rancor. One of these was her adherence to feminist ideology regarding intimate partner violence. I remember telling her about a young family with a small baby who lived above my husband and me for a year or two before I knew her. When we had first moved to the North Island, for the most part, these two kept to themselves and made no trouble, but once a month or so, I would listen as she screamed and railed at her husband. He would beg her to stop, or to at least wait to discuss things until she was more calm. She'd respond by throwing things at him, heavy things judging by the thuds, and screaming ever louder. Sometimes there were noises that could only be his body hitting a wall. He would attempt to remove himself from the situation, stomping across the house and closing doors, shutting himself in a bedroom or a bathroom. But she would follow him from room to room and keep going, escalating it the entire time. I would sit with my hand on the phone, trying to detect the moment when I would have no choice but to call 911, already knowing doing so would probably harm that man more than it helped him. And it always ended the same way. She would go on and on and on for an hour or more, and then he'd finally hit her once. Her diatribe would be cut off mid-sentence, and then everything would be silent. I never saw a bruise on this woman in the year or more that I lived under him. I never saw them in public interacting in a way that would lead anyone to believe she was afraid of him. And in fact, within half an hour of the culmination of many of their fights, I would see them out walking with their baby in the stroller as if nothing untoward had happened. It was only years later, when I discovered The Spearhead, an anti-feminist masculinist blog, that I would be directed to studies by researchers like Murray Strauss, Suzanne Steinmetz, and Dawn Dutton that would confirm that despite the social narrative about violence within families, what I had witnessed and what my husband had suffered was far from uncommon. But when I described what had been going on in the apartment upstairs, my friend insisted that the woman was the abused party and the man was the abuser. She spun me a bizarre 9/11 truther-esque theory that the woman, knowing the abuse would come sooner or later, was taking power over it by dictating when and how it would go down. That battered women know the violence is only a matter of time and only a matter of how bad, and that this woman's actions were an attempt to diffuse his violence before it reached potentially fatal levels. That what she regularly did to her husband, sometimes for hours on end before he'd finally retaliate, was preemptive self-defense. I was astonished at her resistance to the very idea that a woman could be the violent party in a relationship, or that a man driven to his limit by a prolonged assault should not be cast as a villain for defending himself, and might even be forgiven for the human failing of snapping and acting out under such an onslaught, even when he was in no real danger, just because the person he had defended himself from was a wife. My friend wasn't stupid. And yet I couldn't convince her that she was wrong about this, not even as an exception to the rule. To her, there was only the rule, no exceptions, and every incident of intimate partner violence must be twisted and warped until it complies with the paradigm that only men are ever abusers and only women are ever abused. Eventually, through an unspoken consensus, we agreed that these matters were off limits in our conversations for the sake of maintaining the friendship which we both valued. It was through my time at the Spearhead that I came to understand how someone so smart could be so unbelievably blind. And it was through my own growing awareness that I began to realize just how unaware everyone else seemed to be, and why. And that's when I started really talking about it. I'm done.
You know, I don't think I've ever heard you say something so personal, Karen. I don't mean that as like, oh, sorry, I'm a Sagittarius. My foot is permanently adhered to my mouth.
No, I don't generally talk a whole lot about my personal life, but yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing it. And I just wanted to point out something. It's fucking amazing to me. A man can endure how much abuse, and if he so much as slaps a woman abusing him, he's a demon that should be condemned to the depths of hell. And yet, a woman can kill a man based on past abuse, and that's justified. A man can't even slap a woman, but a woman can kill a man, and it's justified.
Yeah, no, a man can't slap a woman even in the midst of being assaulted, but a woman can pour gasoline over her husband and burn him in his bed on the basis of past abuse.
She can even get out of being sentenced immediately because people will have sympathy for her even if she doesn't prove that she was abused, even if they're certain that she wasn't abused, like with Jodi Arias.
Or with Michael Ryan's ex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she doesn't even have to claim abuse. She can get sympathy even if she is the only aggressor.
Yeah. The other thing,
I gotta say this, only a feminist could find empowerment in arguing that men have so much control over women that a woman's only response to domestic violence might be deciding when it happens by deliberately inciting it.
Okay.
I know, but that's exactly what she said.
I just want to point something out, and I think this comes back to what I've been talking about, how society seems to erase women's personhood. I wonder if some way women like this simply, and I don't mean to defend her, it's just trying to understand the mindset. They actually want an acknowledgement that they have an effect on their partner, that there is some kind of consequence to their personal actions that their partner will take. And I wonder if the frustration is that, and this is a totally, totally sick and unhealthy way to do it, but I wonder if that's sort of an acting out of that particular mindset that we just erase. I've used this scenario before to sort of illustrate the point. I mean, if you've ever seen this kind of modernist architecture, like just huge slabs. I think it's huge slabs of concrete, and people will architects would go into poor neighborhoods, and they would do urban revitalization, and they would create these huge monolithic structures that had almost no human quality to them. And the people in those neighborhoods would just deface them constantly, constantly trying to put a mark on them to make them, because they were in their space. They wanted to know that they had some sort of effect on the world around them, that it was, they owned it somehow. So they would deface it. They would put graffiti on it. They would destroy whatever they could. And I wonder if that's the situation with a lot of women, is that they are desperate, in some ways desperately and totally dysfunctionally, trying to get recognition for their personal actions. Put a mark somewhere.
Well, it's actually something Erin Pitsey has sort of said in a different way before, where she's talked about children that grow up in environments like this, where this is how they learn to interact with people. This is how they learn to interact with the people that are closest to them, and to basically, this is how you affect the people around you, and how you get recognition from them.
Yeah, and I mean, and to add on to that, just how you get some sort of sense that your personal actions have any consequences whatsoever. I mean, to think of the desperation of those poor people trying to, these individuals in these cultures, trying to make a mark on their own environment to say, I was here, this has some relation to me. And the same situation, it's like this existential nightmare that we put women in. And to me, it makes a hell of a lot of sense why women are going fucking bonkers in it. And I say this not to excuse women's behavior, but to understand the kind of dysfunctionalism that our gender dynamic inspires in women, because we don't give them a sense of personal consequence, and I think that can create total psychosis.
Well, I think honestly, part of what made her constantly escalate, as I was listening, because you could hear him, because he of course was raising his voice as well to be heard over the noise that she was making, and he was begging her, please, 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 just calm down, please, please, just stop. And it's almost like every time he sort of tried to be conciliatory, or he tried to be reasonable, he tried to be rational with her, tried to treat what she was doing as if it was sort of a rational thing that, yes, we will table it for discussion later because it's actually a rational grievance that you have, or whatever, right? Every time he took it seriously, right? As I think she was acting out because she just wanted to act out, and every time he put up with it, right, and just tried to sort of supplicate his way through the conflict, that was when she would escalate even higher. And she really was, in my mind, she really was wanting that slap, or whatever it is, because I could never hear what he was doing. It was just like if she's cut off mid-sentence and everything's quiet, and then you sort of hear two sets of footsteps, and and then you see them outside half an hour later and they look fine. You're not thinking that whatever he did was not that severe, but he had to have, startled her some way, taken her by the shoulders and shaken her, or slapped her, or something. That was what she needed from him. Was she needed her world? I don't know, hormones after the baby, whatever, and PMS, right? Her world, her emotional world, was spiraling out of control, and she was demanding that he be an anchor. And instead, he was being a follower. He wasn't putting his foot down and saying, here's your solid world. Here's the boundaries in it. Here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to do this. I'm not going to put up with it, right? And we're going to get control of your emotions right now. He wasn't doing any of that. And I think that was maybe what she was looking for, was somebody to actually draw a line and push her back behind it, and back into a place where she felt like she wasn't so out of control. Because if she had experienced abuse as a child, and if she was having all kinds of hormone fluctuations from being with a child that was less than a year old, I can totally see her having all kinds of irrational emotions that are out of control, right? And what he was doing in supplicating and begging and pleading and all of those things, none of that was what she wanted.
Well, she probably wanted a sense that she had some effect on him. So, I mean, and the thing is that he shouldn't necessarily be in the position of having to do that.
No.
And the other thing is, like, if feminists are going to say, well, if he was abusing her and she shot his head and blew his brains out across a wall, and that's just to stop the abuse, well, then why do they have a problem with him slapping her to stop her abuse?
Yeah. Well, because they don't see her abuse as abuse.
It's just like, no, at some point you have to have some kind of reasonable attitude towards this. If you can justify a female spouse pouring gas, killing a man in the most horrific ways you could possibly imagine, pouring gasoline on him and lighting him on fire, and you can justify this to stop the abuse, and then you say, but if a guy is being constantly abused by his wife, and the only thing that will stop her is for him to slap her and say, stop, you can't justify that, even though nobody actually ends up dead or bleeding.
Or bruised.
Or bruised.
Or even crying.
Yeah. You tell me. Don't say that Alison Tiemann justifies men slapping women you explain to me how you can justify a woman brutally murdering a man because he's so allegedly abusive, but you cannot, to end his alleged abuse, but you cannot justify. You will say a man is a demon if he just slaps a woman to end hers. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
It was just something keyed off of what Karen was saying, where the basically only two recourses that a man has, because men generally do not want to fight. Men are very peace-loving creatures, and they will, a lot of times, that's why we see so many browbeaten husbands, is because they're like, okay, honey, whatever, let's just not fight. I will, what's the word? Start with a C. I will just go with whatever.
Happy wife, happy life. I'll just capitulate.
Yes, exactly. They'll just go, the C word. They will capitulate with whatever demands are, and they're like, okay, whatever, we'll just go with it. That's fine. Just let's not fight. Let's have some peace. That's kind of the primary thing men look for in a homestead. So that is one way that men can handle, I guess, a woman that keeps escalating, is just bow down lower and lower. But I mean, at a certain point, obviously, a lot of men can't necessarily do that, and women will become physically abusive, and then that's just not good for anyone, because men have been really severely damaged by very heavy and hot objects by women, to the point of losing limbs and having scars. And so it can be very serious if you just continue capitulating with someone who's abusive and thinks that your body belongs to them, to the point where they can do whatever they want with it without any repercussions. So the other thing, though, that happens frequently is a man will escalate as well, because that's the only thing you can do is keep escalating, and the woman escalates, and then you have to escalate more, and the only thing that will actually stop the woman from continuing on this insane tirade is when you basically, the man losing his mind, just utterly going apeshit, screaming, yelling, whatever, raising the voice so hard that it's like, she's like, oh shit, bring that a little bit of fear, I guess. I don't know what it is that stops them, but I've seen that firsthand, where the female will actually continue escalating until the man turns into a complete ape gorilla being and just goes off, and then that is the only thing that quiets the woman. So in fact, they're training men to be a lot more aggressive and not how they want to be, because it is the only thing that will stop the onslaught.
I just have one question about this. Thinking about this, what do we expect when we as a society raise girls to see attention as an entitlement and railing as a way to get it, but we raise boys to see demanding attention as something bad that deserves a range of responses, from ignoring them to punishing them? What do we expect to result from that, except that a percentage of kids will grow up to engage each other this way?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's an extremely toxic thing to give one segment of the population sort of this entitlement to complain at will over everything and tattle, right? Because the whole thing with abusing the process that's been given to women, that's been weaponized specifically for them, that starts in early childhood. We all knew one girl or more, right, in elementary school, who would make up stories just to tattle on people and get them in trouble, who used the adults, the authority figures, as a tool of bullying. We all knew at least one, didn't we?
Or who would actually even push people into reacting to them and then go tattle.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just, you train girls to behave in this way. You train men to suck it in, hold it in, suck it up, put up with it, capitulate, and then finally they can't do it anymore, and they snap. And like, because I don't know, because I didn't see. I didn't
it's
see
not only that, we're
injuries on
teaching,
this guy. I didn't see serious injuries on this guy, right? Ever.
but it's not just that. We're
Yeah.
teaching them to view those complaints as wrong, right? So when they encounter women who do that,
Yeah.
they see these women behaving wrongly. So it's not just that they are forced to hold things in, it's that they're also witnessing a behavior that has been made alien to them, that they've been taught to disapprove of, and find, then consider reason, why they've been punished in the past.
Well, and honestly, just to allow that guy, even if his life is not in danger, to allow a guy to be human enough to just finally, after an hour and a half of this, to just fucking lose it and hit her back just once, right? I mean, honestly, which one of us would put up with somebody screaming the most demeaning, emasculating, or degrading shit right in our faces, throwing things at us, pushing us around, following us from room to room, right? Hitting us, and then say, when your life wasn't in danger, so you had no cause to actually strike out, to actually just snap, right? And lose it, and just lose your control for that 1 second where your hand swung out and connected, right?
He doesn't even have to hit her to be the one to be considered the one who created the violence. He doesn't have to even hit her to get arrested. The 7 years in hell story. The woman who was the accuser, the basically the victimizer in that story, had a second marriage in which it was a two-way domestic violent relationship. There was no other way to describe that. But it wasn't two-way because both sides just would start shit with each other. She would start shit, and then eventually he would try to get away. And he got arrested and spent 18 months in jail for taking the only feasible exit, the only safe exit from a room in which she was throwing heavy objects at him. And it meant he had to brush past her on his way out.
Yeah, he
because on his way out, he touched her. That was considered domestic violence.
Fucking hell.
No, but regardless, let's answer Karen's question. Yeah, I can understand after 2 hours of being harassed and harangued and insulted and prodded and hit and had objects thrown at you that you might have a little bit, lose your temper a little bit. And you're not a monster if you do. And everybody
under less circumstances than that.
Everybody's trying to make these men out to be monsters, and in that scenario, I personally think that he was being provoked into some sort of non-consensual BDSM. I would title it that way. That she would push every single button. She would abuse him until he gave her what she wanted.
Yeah.
And she was the one who was in control of the situation because she was the one who was stalking him and going after him until he gave her what she wanted. And he didn't want to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, I don't think I can stress enough, though, the thing that a lot of women do not understand is that when women behave like that toward a man, they're exhibiting a behavior that men are taught to see as a taboo behavior in themselves. It's not just men having bottled up emotions. It's not just men having their restraint tested. They are watching someone engage in reprehensible behavior. When you're witnessing someone behave reprehensibly, that has an impact as well. It has an impact on your ability to respect that person. You lose respect for a person who behaves reprehensibly in front of you. And that is a natural result that the women who behave this way deserve. They deserve to lose the respect of the men they abuse. They do not deserve to be respected as ladies. They do not deserve to be treated as ladies. They do not deserve to be protected as ladies. They have lost their status as ladies. And therefore, they lose the protection of the taboo. And at that point,
well, they should.
You know, that's the thing. There is a point at which you switch someone's point of view towards you from lady to opponent to assailant.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of women understand when you get in somebody's face and you push and you push and you push and you behave in a way that is abhorrent, that at some point you stop looking like a girl to them.
Yeah.
You don't deserve to be separated into gender categories if you don't fill the role. You don't deserve to have that, that split. It's okay to hit a guy, it's not okay to hit a girl. Even if that was right, even if that split was okay,
yeah,
where the half that says it's okay to hit a guy was okay, which it's not, but even if it was, you lose the right to your half when you start acting like a man.
Well, it's like that bus driver in Detroit or wherever who, I think he was suspended or fired, but it was a viral video. The woman was, she wanted to ride for free even though she had money. She was refusing to pay, and he told her, no, get the fuck off my bus. And then she got in his face, and she started hitting him, and she spit on him. And then he just got up, and he freaking landed an uppercut on her and knocked her flat. And he said, you want to act like a man? I'll treat you like a man.
Yeah, you cannot expect to jump down from a pedestal and expect other people to look at you like you're still on top of it.
Okay, guys.
Okay, there's people waiting to
Yep.
hear the stories. Yes.
So Theron.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, before I do my thing, I know that in a situation like that, I would have seriously hurt that woman.
Oh yeah.
Much more than any man I know, I would have hurt her. But the thing is, I probably would have gotten away with it a lot more than if some of the men in my life did it. Anyways, so my red pill moment. So I kind of feel nervous following up after Karen and Hannah, because you guys, I loved your stories and made me emotional. But here it goes. The date is February 18th, 2015, and the Huffington Post article heading reads, Transgender SFU students stage protest to demand more gender-inclusive washrooms. Theron Meyer has come to expect double takes and nasty comments every time she uses a public washroom. The 20-year-old Simon Fraser University student who identifies herself as trans feminine goes out of her way to avoid multi-stall washrooms, even tolerating hours of discomfort to avoid the subtle but powerful harassment leveled against her. Quote, they're always very deliberate. They look at me, they exit the room, and look at me again just to make sure what my gender is, she said. That's very ostracizing. I think a lot of people don't experience that and don't understand the degree to which that is harmful to my livelihood and to other trans people's livelihood. Maya was amongst the students who staged a protest Wednesday to demand more gender-inclusive washrooms at SFU. The issue extends far beyond the university in Burnaby, BC, as transgender students across Canada fight to feel safe using public facilities. There are about 50 single-stall washrooms on the university's main campus in Burnaby, but protesters say they want gender-inclusive signs added to them and a number of multi-stall men's and women's washrooms to be made gender-neutral. It still shocks me every time I look back on this year and realize how recently it was when I made the decision to disaffiliate from the social justice missionaries and apostatize myself from this church of feminism. It's so odd and unreal to think that literally a few months ago, I willingly clothed myself in a straitjacket of victimhood and self-pity before embarking on the world every day, grimacing at every glance that had the potential of being interpreted as a microaggression, and swooning every time I passed a male-female washroom sign because it was, quote, enforcing the gender binary and erased my identity. And it's equally odd and unreal to think that I surrounded myself with people who encouraged this masochism. But the rapidity of my journey to men's rights activism and to the development of a healthy and positive female identity and trans identity speaks volumes to the nature of the red pill. It truly is an awakening. Sometimes that does not necessarily evolve over years and years of life experience, but rather something that just clicks in a matter of relative moments, a realization after which the understanding and perception of those years and years of prior experience changes fundamentally, and there's no turning back. When I trace back the moment where I took the proverbial red pill and finally discovered that missing puzzle piece that resolved my years of hesitance over the hegemony surrounding gender politics, I'm brought back to that gender-inclusive washroom protest that was covered in the Huffington Post article. As co-organizer of that protest, my interest was to raise awareness of issues that trans folks face on campus, with specific focus on the daily tribulations of accessing shared washrooms. To this day, I stand by the validity of trans issues, although I conceptualize them quite differently nowadays. But little did I realize that advocating for trans awareness would, at least in the context of this protest, mean raising the issues of another group of people. I noticed my fellow organizers ideating the nature of the washroom shitting, as it was called, quite differently from myself. When speaking to journalists and media representatives, they specified that they would like to see all multi-stall men's washrooms converted to gender neutral and keep the women's washrooms as is, because, quote, men don't face systemic victimization like women do, and that we should maintain a safe space for women students on campus. Assuming my co-workers were referring to the intimate partner violence and sexual violence that women face at the hands of men, I approached them with my concern that targeting men's washrooms would send a message that we care less about those men who had been similarly victimized by women and may feel uncomfortable or at risk sharing washrooms with women. I added that even if it is the case that male victimization at the hands of women make up a minority of cases, that we as trans students probably make up an even smaller minority of the general populace, and that acting callously towards those male students would be severely hypocritical and arrogant. They placated me and my concerns without really committing to a change in strategy. The day of the protest rolled around, and I was looking forward to seeing people's faces when they opened the washroom stall door, only to find a tranny in a sandwich board occupying the cubicle and imploring them to sign the petition, and to instill in students, male and female, a sense of discomfort that would simulate and thereby make aware the discomfort that many trans students often face. But I soon realized that the grievances that I initially had expressed to my co-workers were to no avail. Protesters ended up converting and colonizing a men's washroom only, and soon the washroom transformed into a sea of problematic walruses. Despite my efforts to get some of the protesters to migrate to the corresponding women's washroom, handing out pamphlets in the women's washroom turned out to be a single-man job, and there I was by myself in the women's washroom. It is at this moment that I realized that something is deeply wrong. How could people who claim to be on the forefront of gender activism and gender equality have such an unfair approach to such a matter? As I said earlier, I didn't realize that advocating for trans awareness would mean erasing issues of another group of people. I also didn't realize that advocating for 0.3% of the population would mean erasing the issues of the other 50%. But I soon realized that it was not just erasure that was being carried out, but that there was also an implicit sentiment of blame expressed by the social justice missionaries of the Church of Feminism who decided to leave their abbeys to attend the protest that day. It was just this day that galvanized me into researching men's issues obsessively and monomaniacally for weeks and weeks on end, and it obviously led me down the rabbit hole of the men's rights movement. After which the summer had passed, and
Uh-oh.
What's up?
Karen?
Is your dog doing something, Karen?
No. I can't hear Theron.
Oh, okay.
She kind of went warbly and.
Oh, she just did for you, Karen. So, Theron, I think back up a few sentences and keep going.
Okay. It was this day that galvanized me into researching men's issues, and it inevitably led me down the rabbit hole of the men's rights movement. The summer had passed, and this September I started the SFU Advocacy for Men and Boys Society with some friends who had similar interests. But there's an amazing irony to the story. See, even though sex-segregated washrooms are so common to our daily lives, they're a relatively new invention dating back to the mid to late 19th century when women started to enter the workforce. Sex-segregated washrooms were instated for the same reason women had their own car on trains, and why they had separate entrances at banks and other public spaces. It was to protect the fragile Victorian women from the vile predations of men. It doesn't seem like much has changed, and that's the age-old story of feminism, isn't it? To purport to be for radical change, but never addressing reforming our gynocentric culture at any fundamental level. That's when I learned feminism is just traditionalism in problem glasses and blue hair. And then, along that journey, I also made it obviously struck something very personal with me, because I have a little brother. He's 12 years old now, and he's just the sweetest little boy. I'll tell a personal story here. About a week ago, for the first time, like I've been hesitating coming out as trans to him because I was extremely worried that he wouldn't understand. And I was sorry, I was extremely worried that he'd be resentful or angry or just out of not understanding what that means. But I told him, you know, I know you think I'm your brother, but I'm actually, like, I'm a girl on the inside. And he's like, oh yeah, I kind of knew that. Why are you telling me this like it's this big surprise? And then he gave me a hug and he said, you're the best sister ever.
Oh.
And I was in tears. And so it was just the thought of these people telling him that he's a privileged oppressor and that the world is structured in his favor, and just invalidating his experience and his issues that he might have in the future just made me so sick to my stomach. And that's probably when I realized that I need to do something about it. That's probably why I started the SFU Advocacy for Men and Boys Society, because of my little brother who is so amazing. And that's my story.
All I can say is that it was very, very, it was heart, you know, like Karen's and Hannah's, very heartfelt, and I think it definitely earns its place with Karen and Hannah's stories too. And I just want to say that, yeah, Hannah just put in the chat, that is beautiful. I just wanted to say that if you are bothered by that, then do not watch the Rant Zerker today, because, yeah. Don't, because you'll be quite aggravated.
Okay.
Over what we were dealing with. And
I actually did watch that Rant Zerker. I commented in the chat because you guys said hung instead of hanged.
Oh yeah, no. He said hung, and then I repeated hung, but I know it's hanged. Hanged is the proper thing. Hung is you know, how well endowed a man is. Hanged.
I'm barely literate in English.
Hanged is the other end of the body there, Allison.
Yeah.
Art gets hung, people get hanged.
Men are hung, and they are hanged, but they're totally different things.
Okay, I understand that, but you know that I struggle with the words and things.
According to legend, black men are hung more than white men. They're also hanged more than white men.
Oh my God, that was terrible.
Horrible, and it's not legend. The second part, I don't know about the first part, but
Well, the first part is it's supported by some circumstantial evidence, such as the size of the condoms marketed in certain countries or regions of the world.
Well, the interesting thing about that is actually, whenever doing primatology studies, etc., they found that the penis size of a male actually corresponds with how adulterous or free-spirited the female is. And the more loose, I guess, and adventurous their women are, the longer is the male penis to, I guess, ensure that he is actually the father, like it gets deeper in than the other ones. And then species that are, females are more pair bonded, they actually have much, much smaller penis sizes. So go Asian girls, I guess.
Actually,
back to Karen, or back
no,
to...
no, I got to comment on this, Hannah.
Dear God.
We're
going to get to discuss Theron's...
The polygynous, it's actually polygyny, I think, that creates smaller penises. So the species with males with multiple partners generally have the smallest penises. So I guess, and I don't want to say Mormonism because I know they don't all practice that, but the sects that do, but they got other problems too. So I'll just crawl away now.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out, I think Theron, your story has something in common with all of us, that, like, you talked about your little brother. I have, my family members are the ones that I saw suffering, and I worry about the world my son and daughters are going to grow up in, and what kind of dehumanization they're going to face because of the issues that we sort of deal with, if those were left unchecked. But I also wanted to comment on the social justice warriors that you dealt with when you were protesting before, and how they kind of co-opted your cause and made it about their own issues. And it strikes me that, well, basically feminists in general, but social justice warriors to a degree as well, do that to the entire GLBT community. It ceases to be, like, you start talking about trans issues, you start talking about gay issues, you start talking about lesbian or bisexual issues, and all of a sudden you're talking about everything in terms of this happens because patriarchy hates women. It never can be about the experiences of the people involved or the needs of the people involved. It always has to go back to being about patriarchy hates women, or it's about race, or, and
no, actually, race goes back to patriarchy hates women too.
Yeah, but they'll cry intersectionality when they want to make an issue a woman's issue, even if it's primarily a racial issue, or even if it's primarily a religious issue, or something like that. But as soon as it's the other way around, or they want it to be the other way around, they'll erase the experiences and the needs of people who are genuinely discriminated against.
Yeah, like in this situation with the protest, they would erase people who used the women's washroom and had the cops called on them by women, because a man is more likely to make a rude comment or something. A woman is more likely to call the fucking cops. So because of their stupid, fucked up ideology, they will erase that. Because just so that it can fit into that framework. And
I cannot imagine not even being able to go to the bathroom without being harassed just for who you are. I mean, and here these women are playing victim, and when they're the bullies in that particular situation. And as they've basically said, no, you don't even have the right to have an ordinary, everyday, every person has it, bodily function, just like everybody else.
Yeah, and that's like an actual legitimate thing. and I think like it is fair to raise awareness about that. And I feel like I still stand by the fact that I think it was a fair protest, or a fair, like, it was a good thing to do. Got people thinking about, what trans people experience. I guess
So I really hate that they stole social justice as a bad term, because social justice does have a place and progressive is important, but it's like, you freaking people who just want to take and control what others are doing, and you're using the good things that are associated with, even like feminism started out as this great thing, right? So they're using the good things that are associated with progressivism and feminism and all these, and going apeshit with it to control others and be basically fascist. And it's like, you're not progressives, you're not social justice, anything. I hate that you stole those terms from us, because I believe in both of those things.
I don't. I don't believe in either one of them. And I'll be honest, I differentiate between social justice and civil rights. There's a very strong difference between the two. And as far as feminism is concerned, feminism's never been anything but the act of gendering genderless issues in order to reserve compassion for women and blame for men.
Or responsibility for men.
Yeah.
Theron, did you want to complete your thought before we go on to Anna and Brian?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, just about like our kids, or like my brother, and the world that they have to grow up in. Our vice president of our club wrote a letter in response to an article that was written in our school newspaper about why SFU is. The article's name was SFU isn't ready for a men's center, and it was kind of a stupid article and whatever. And then he said in his response that men are more likely to be violently victimized. And then in the comment section of the response article, someone quoted him, and I assume it's a feminist because it sounds like it by what they were saying, but like quoted him where he said men make up the vast majority of murder victims as well as non-fatal assaults, and then she was like, yes, by other men, take some responsibility. And that's exactly the shit that I am terrified that is going to be projected on my little brother, is this idea of collective guilt about if one man does it to a woman, or to, well, anyone really, then somehow all men are responsible for it. And it's so fucked up. Other than that, I wanted to say, I kind of planned on ending it on the note of, I acknowledge how new I actually am realistically to basically everything. I mean, I think I've researched and thought very deeply about a lot of things that we talk about. Obviously, I have meaningful things to say, but I really look up to each and every one of you guys on this panel, and I just want to say that I admire you guys, and that I am so excited to learn even more than I've already learned from all of you. And thank you.
Wow.
Well, you're welcome. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. I have to say, I admire you having the brains and the strength to walk away from a cult, because that's basically what the social justice warrior mentality is, and a lot of people are unable to do that. It's very hard.
Yeah, I agree. It takes a level of self-reflection, and I think a little bit of intelligence as well.
All right, so Brian, Anna.
Yeah, I'll go. Mine's kind of shorter, but okay. So my red pill moment, like Hannah's red pill moment, it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks. It kind of sprinkled in over time. Came in several bits and thoughts I entertained over an extended period. The first and most pertinent part of that journey came when I encountered a truth that ran harshly and steadfastly against everything that I had been led to believe from my parents, from my family, from my culture. And that was that before I always thought that what makes a good man were his good deeds, and that if I performed good deeds, even as a young boy, growing up in a Catholic in a Catholic family, but even beyond, the religious, if I did these things, not only would I get value and I would be appreciated, but by the people who are close to me, but I would also be honored, and this treatment would be reciprocated in people that I would meet in my life, and I would, in women in particular, would basically find that attractive, and they would be curious about me, and they would want to know me better. One day, though, a friend of mine said, this was in my 20s, as I was a bit more jaded, and he said so in a moment of sort of like a hangover. We were having breakfast at a restaurant, and we were just talking about our day-to-day struggles. He said that in life you're going to accumulate a series of what are called attaboys and oh shits. And one oh shit will kill 1,000 attaboys. And he doesn't realize the profoundness of that statement as I heard it. Essentially, what I come to realize, and this was something that I essentially was seeing as I was growing up in my life, is that no matter how many good things you try to do, if you do one thing wrong, if you come across selfish in one small way, or if you just are absent-minded or for whatever reason, all of the good that you've done becomes canceled. I then understood that to live your life according to other people's expectations is not only unsatisfactory for you as an individual, but it is self-erasing and will not bring you what it is that you might be looking for. I soon saw after this that it was particularly useless to men, as men were only valued for the good that they can do and not for the people that they were. I wasn't given any sort of value just for existing. It was only based on what I could provide. And this wasn't just to women, but this was to other men as well, and to people that I wanted to impress at my job, and to my family, and basically in every circle where I was had an opportunity to get some kind of social or social currency. Then I learned, as I was talking to a friend of mine, he told me, I was explaining to him this theory that I had, where essentially, if you try to be a good man, and you make a lot of effort to do so, every time you screw up, the only thing that people see is what you did wrong, and it actually cancels out most or all of the good that you may have done. And on the flip side of that, a person who may have had like a reputation for not being good decides to do something selfless, or more like an Ebenezer Scrooge character, decides to do something nice, gets a great deal of credit for that. It's almost like, oh, he's changing, something about this person is improving. I wasn't the kind of person that could be the latter. I was just sort of like conditioned to be the former. So I was explaining this to another friend of mine, and he was very worldly. He spent a lot of time looking at things online, and he was very interested in culture, and he told me about the grass eater movement in Japan. And when I heard about that, and he explained what was going on in that country and what men were doing, I just became obsessed with it, and I looked into it, and I actually found my way to men going their own way content. And I never looked back ever since. And this is basically how I found my way to Karen's videos, and specifically the feminism and the disposable male one. And he's a nice guy, I think it's he's a nice guy, let's get rid of him, or something like that. And that's basically it. Yeah, he's a nice guy, kill him, I think, yeah. But that was basically the end of it. And it was actually after that I decided, around that time, I was making a decision to, that everything that I had been doing was a lie. I mean, everything that I was living by was a lie. And I think a lot of men do live by that, because they get told, if if you're this way, then everything will come to you, and it's a natural consequence because people love people who are nice. But it just isn't the case. It's not that you have to be mean, but it's not about trying to appeal to other people. And that's the main thing that I carry with me, and that was actually the inspiration for the book that I do. And that's basically it. So it's a short story.
Thank you, Brian. I think we got to say goodbye to Hannah. It's a short story, but it's a good one.
And it was an awesome story. But I do have to go. I got to go to work. And we'll see you guys later.
Yeah. Good night, Hannah.
Bye, Hannah.
Soon.
Good night, Hannah.
Especially, thank you, Karen. Especially when you're saying the story as a Doge dressed up like the Monopoly character. That just makes it even better. So Anna, I think it's time. If you're able to speak at the moment.
I am indeed. All right. So mine's very short too, because reasons. Also, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a hey, here's my quick explanation. I could go into more personal detail if that's like the thing we're looking for, but that's not what I was. I didn't expound on any personal details because for brevity's sake, I guess. So here's my red pill. Now, the idea that women are victims and in constant need of concern and protection from others rang false ever since I was little. Watching my grandmother and mother not only be successful and powerful women and feminine at the same time in their own right, but also hold complete dominion over their husbands through nagging, guilt, and emotional abuse that men had very few ways of retaliating against. And personally, myself, I was not being treated like a special snowflake or really a girl, but by my family. And that certainly did not help me effortlessly belong to the girls' club, nor hold any delusions of grandeur related to my anatomy. So to expound a little bit, I was an awkward, kid that had just a few strange girls that were my friends as well. So basically, entirely Asperger's autistic spectrum. I belonged with the boys a lot more than the girls. They weren't mean to me like the girls were until later, but it was different kind of mean. And girls have always been very, emotionally cutting mean. So it was like, well, I don't belong with the girls, I guess, because every time I try to be friends, I get rejected. So, okay, then. Anyway, so I definitely did not hold any delusions of grandeur related to my anatomy until I moved to the U.S. in my teens. Everyone and everything around me was always into female empowerment, even growing up. But in the U.S., it was a particular brand that was to exclusion of all others, meaning men. So, of course, my teenage identity carried all the same, boys have cooties, throw rocks at them. And if girls ruled, there would never be war tropes of feminism, just like everyone else my age. This was at odds with some of my desires of caring for men and wanting to serve their needs, just like I've seen men in traditional gender roles always serve the women. Then, also to expound once again, I grew up watching my grandmother and my grandfather have a sort of a partnership that worked when it came to tending the garden farm thing together. She, cooked meals while he went to work because she had to retire when I was born to take care of me because my mom was in med school. And she's a crazy woman at 21. So she was going through med school, and my grandma had to retire a year early before getting her full retirement package. So I'm sure that is one of the reasons why she was a bitch to me all the time. But I saw kind of a traditional gender role between my grandparents where my grandmother sewed up his shirts and buttons that were falling off because that's just, that's part of the culture I grew up in. You fix things instead of buying new ones. But it was kind of the male-female division of labor. And I was really, really into that. So all of this was at odds with some of my desires of caring for men in the way that I've seen basically my grandmother do. And it's I've seen the men also cater and labor for the women, and I've seen the women give back, and I really like that. So I was kind of in a, zone of contradictions there. So then I met a really special person who has since become my sensei, and we took a hard look at male-female relations around us. And without the veil of gynocentrism, through his help basically introducing me to this taking the red pill introduces you to a new world. It's like Morpheus, it's like reality is not how it seems. So without this veil of gynocentrism, I stopped excusing questionable female behavior towards men, and suddenly a lot of ideas we were told about men and women fell horribly and irrevocably flat. And to add to that, a personal experience happened to me in high school where I guess this would be pertinent to a lot of things we talked about. But one of the biggest reasons, I guess, I am an MRA or men's respect activist or men's rights, whatever, and I am mainly an anti-feminist, specifically because of this too. I was dating, or at least I was really interested in a boy in high school. We ended up dating. It was my first long-term, serious, year-long, whatever relationship. So when I was interested in him and trying to court each other, at one point when we actually got to finally talking, after a few months of doing the dance, somebody from my class, he was a year older, and somebody from my class, a boy, approached me and was like, I think he was a teacher's son too, this boy who came to warn me about the guy that I was interested in. So he was like, you're like dating, or you're hanging out with a rapist, right? And I was like, what on earth are you talking about? Because what happened is the previous relationship that the guy I was interested in had was a 3-year-long relationship, and during that time he was unfaithful with another girl from school because his previous girlfriend had absolutely no sex drive. It was like not one of those things that she did, and my partner, ex-boyfriend, but later my partner, him and I had a similar sex drive, so I can understand that it'd be one of those things that he would want to supplement and also not want to break off the really long relationship. So whatever, was a complicated situation, freaking teenagers, who cares? So the girl that he was cheating with on his long-term girlfriend, she had a religious family. Of course, this was in the Arkansas, by the way, when I lived in Arkansas. So his very small town too. His girlfriend cheating girl had a strict kind of family and grandparents that were also took care of her mainly, and something happened to where cops or whoever showed up to her door to ask about something or other, and it involved him, and she had, instead of facing her grandparents and saying like, yeah, we've had a relationship, she was like, oh, he raped me. And I've been in contact with this girl, and I mean, okay, so this boy who was in band, his entire band family completely abandoned him because the cheating girl that he raped was in band also, and so they completely sided with her, as always happens, and they completely abandoned him, and of course we're talking shit about him and we're warning me, so utterly going after this man's reputation and any possibility of him getting another relationship over. And I've been in contact with this girl, I've talked to her, we're sort of on a friendly note, I guess, because I dated him for a year after that in the midst of all this scandal. I talked to her, and I have in writing from her herself saying that yes, I fucking lied because I didn't want to tell my grandparents that I was having sex, so I made up the rape lie. It's a fact. I know from personal experience that girls actually literally straight up on the spot say that a guy raped them because that's easier than facing reality and being mildly uncomfortable. It is that prevalent. The girls will sooner say that somebody raped them than like even say, oh yeah, I totally ate a hamburger today. It's on that level. And I mean, I know, once again, teenagers in the South, but still, like, with how prevalent this rape culture, which is people being accused of rape and lying about it over and over and over in public media, girls lying about it, that is the rape culture currently, and people don't want to face that. But I feel like it had, that's the same thing that just exploded. And so I saw that, and then later on, after taking the red pill already, which of course jived with all the other experiences I've had growing up with my grandparents, same nagging kind of to the point where a man can't help but like slap once, and then he's the big bad horrible monster, and everyone talks shit about him. To the point of having a father who was divorced. My parents had 3 when I was 3 years old, so my grandmother talked shit about my dad all the time, even though I loved him, and it was like this guy who came and saw me and we hang out and it was great. Why is she constantly talking shit about him? So, and then later, after taking the red pill, I mean, and being in America, I saw a lot of family court type situations, fuck over men, and I very much also saw women who have been with their husbands for like 10 to 14 years and then leaving them and then making up stories about how they're somehow, terribly oppressed and it's just horrible and how the man left them. So totally lying about all that. And it's just been sick to watch women actively abuse men while claiming that men are the abusers. So projection is just the biggest thing. So that kind of leads me into the MRA starter kit that I have, which is whenever you're told a categorical statement about an entire group's behavior, look at your own personal experiences. Not what you've seen on TV or stories you heard people say about what they heard. Real, factual, first-person accounts of experiences and the frequency with which that thing happens to real people in real life that you really actually know in person. Then remember that gynecentrism's favorite tool is projection. And go get facts, learn, educate, and engage your logic in light of the evidence you see. So, and then there's a link to one of Karen's videos that I really like. But yeah, that's kind of been the red pill impetus for me there.
Wow. Thanks, Anna. That rape accusation story, it's crazy. Were there any consequences? Really. Yeah, they are. Were there any consequences for that, Anna? For her? Or that just sort of
since it was never a criminal charge, I mean, she didn't press charges. It was just entirely court of public opinion, reputation ruined.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Well, that's still pretty awful. I mean, God, I wouldn't want. I don't even know what that'd be like. You wouldn't. It wouldn't even have to become a criminal thing, right? I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of times people don't even especially if you're more impoverished or they actually moved from California to Arkansas area to live with family because of having financial issues due to this guy's mom being actually entirely irresponsible and him having to raise his 3 sisters and brother and 2 little sisters. So he was basically being the mother of the family while also having violent fistfights with his Italian dad because that's a thing. While the mom was totally useless and out on prescription drugs. But anyway, point is, this is somebody who probably was not going to leave. It's Arkansas people, okay? He was probably not going to leave the area though. A lot of times people stay where they're at and they can't go anywhere else due to financial issues or just sometimes people get in the habit. It's just one of those things that they stay in the same city that life landed them in. So imagine basically all the high school friends that you would have had in high school and had a good experience there. That ruined, of course, but then also moving on from there, it's all the same people you're going to be interacting with all the time. So it's just such a shitty situation.
Yeah. I wonder if because you said that the girl who made the accusation, she lived with her mom who moved from California to Arkansas.
No, that's not the guy, sorry.
It's the guy's mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, the girl, I don't know much about her, sorry.
Never mind then. Okay. So... those are all great stories, and you guys that are listening, we'd like to know if you guys have taken the red pill. What are your red pill stories? You can send us a comment or maybe email us at topic@badgerpod.com. It'd be pretty interesting. But I like reading the comments. I always look at them, so please feel free to send us one. And I want to, do we want to share our resources?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I'll go first because this one's awesome. All right, so on Facebook, I'm in a group called I Don't Need Feminism. I'm gonna share. I'll share screens so you guys can see it if you don't know about it. And if you go to the I Don't Need Feminism Facebook page, I think all you got to do is either like it or join it as a group. I'm pretty sure it's one of those places you like. I'm not really great at the whole Facebook group thing, but and then if you go to that page, there are sources. There's a section for sources or notes, and one of them is this one. It's called Anti-Feminist Sources, and this is good for when you are debating or talking, having discussions with people, and they mention things like the gender wage gap or the 1 in 5 rape statistic and all the usual talking points that feminists use. And this actually has several links to several different places. So, because sometimes, and I know I've come across this, if I bring up try to debunk a myth and I use a source, they say, well, where are the sources for that? And then I bring them one, they may deem that source worthless based on where the source is from. So if I link them to A Voice for Men, for example, they're going to dismiss it because they have already, pre-existing biases against the Voice for Men website, as well as, and this is the important thing, when I talk to people, typically feminists online, about this stuff, my goal is not to change the feminist's mind, because that's almost impossible to do, at least in one sitting. My goal is to get people who might, third parties that might be, you know, an audience that is seeing this unfold, to actually look at it. And I did that when Huffington Post Women put out a video about, you know, what feminism is and is not, and I made like a really long post, and I had like several hundred people looking at it, talking about it, and I linked them to a lot of the stuff here. So if I scroll down, you can see there's like the several links that refute the gender wage gap. I mean, a lot of them. Then there are some here that says some examples of women that earn more than men, and there are several links here. Not all of them are Voice for Men. There are some from Forbes. There are some from Women's Views on News. There's, you know, so they're like, these are not politically aligned, left, right, or center specifically. They're across the board. There's one called the section on women opting out of careers, and there's several links there. Information on false allegations for rape, and there's a section on that. The refutation of rape myths, and there's several links here. Male victims of rape and sexual assault, several links for that. Sexual abuse by women. Sex trafficking by women, so for people who mention sex trafficking, and if you mention, well, actually, women do sex trafficking as well, here are some of that. Domestic violence stuff, you know, inequalities that benefit women, so when men are more likely to be victims of violence, girls leading in academia, paternity fraud, gender sentencing disparity, preferential treatment of institutionalized women, women's buying power, men hit harder during recessions, the Order of the White Feather campaign. So if you want to go back and, you know, sort of like when people want to analyze the suffragettes and you know, what people consider the first wave, female privileges, results in fatherlessness in society. There's so many other things, as you can see. So this is a really, really, really useful resource, and it's on
How do you
Facebook.
access it again?
You go to the Facebook page called I Don't Need Feminism, right here. And I think it's just one that you can just, if you have a Facebook account, you can just go there and you give it a like. Yeah. And then it'll be right here in the notes section. And there are several things written here. And one of them is this one, anti-feminist sources. So that was the specific source link. I can put this in the low bar too if you guys want. I'm fairly certain that it will, like, even if you're not, you know, a Facebook, if you don't have a Facebook account, I think you can access it. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Brian. It's a great primer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks as well, because that's really helpful.
Yeah. And I think we're done. We're ready. We're good. I know some people or at least one person was saying in chat, what about Allison's red pill story?
Yeah, well, what about it?
You
have to wait.
Soon.
We'll do it next time.
Yeah, wait till. It'll have to wait. It'll have to wait.
Are we done with resources?
Yeah, no, I have a whole bunch of resources that I want, and some of them are not.
Okay, yeah, me too. I've got like 2.
Okay, well, let's go one at a time. Let's not talk over each other. So, Theron, you go.
Okay, it's not anything big because, like, I was thinking really hard, and I was like, well, when I started getting into, like, men's rights and stuff, it was mostly, like, Honey Badger Radio and Karen Strawn, and that would not make sense to promote on here. That would be, like...
It's okay.
So I'm going to give to, and I don't mean this as, like, shameless self-promotion, but I think the SFU Advocacy for Men and Boys is a great resource if you are looking to set up a men's issues group, and you are either getting pushback from the bureaucracy or you are expecting that you will, please feel free to contact us through Facebook or something. Give us your case, what's happening, and maybe we can definitely make a video about it or give you advice. Just give us your public support. Just the other week, the SFU AMB made a video in public support of Kevin Ariola's Men's Issues Awareness Society at Ryerson University, and hopefully it'll do something. Because and then we got a write-up in the Ryersonian, the Ryerson University newspaper. I think the article is called Ryerson Student Union receives gets slammed for rejecting Men's Issues Club, and I was featured on there, and I was interviewed and everything. So it actually had an effect. So absolutely, if you wanna start a men's issues group on campus and you need some kind of public support, do send a message on Facebook or email me or message me on YouTube. And then the domesticviolenceresearch.org, which is the website of the Partner Abuse State of Knowledge Project, is a great research for the truth about domestic violence. I think it's the project that Aaron Pitsey is part of, as far as I know. It's just domesticviolenceresearch.org. Okay, yeah, Karen?
Okay, before we go to Karen, though, could you say the full name of your advocacy organization, your university advocacy organization that you founded?
So it's the SFU Advocacy for Men and Boys, and you can find that with the website. You can find it on the Facebook page, and I'll put it in the chat box. Maybe.
Okay, that's the Simon Fraser University Advocacy
Simon
for
Fraser
Men.
University Advocacy for Men and Boys. But on Facebook, it's SFU Advocacy for Men and Boys.
Okay, it's important to get all the words out so people know what to search for.
Absolutely.
All right, Karen.
Okay, I have a few. EqualityCanada.com, that's the website of the Canadian Association for Equality. And also NCFM, National Coalition for Men.org, ncfm.org. NCFM is one of those advocacy groups that doesn't really make the news. They're not internet savvy. Hopefully they will become so with Dean sort of at the helm of their internet coordinator, media coordinator. But they do a lot of really, really, really good on-the-ground work. They are the ones who write letters to Singapore Airlines in stunning and intimidating legalese, telling them that when they ask male passengers to move when they're seated next to an unaccompanied child, that they're actually in violation of UNRRA, which is California's equal rights legislation, and therefore they may actually lose their right. We're sending you this letter to let you know you're in violation before we actually litigate. So please change your policy so that we don't have to litigate. They do all kinds of things like that. They launched a constitutional challenge just this year on selective service when women finally were officially allowed into combat roles. They took that ball and ran with it and said, okay, if women are now allowed if they're fit for combat roles, there's no reason why we can't draft them, and they should be included in selective service legislation. So they do a lot of things like that don't necessarily make the news, and don't end up on YouTube and don't end up in all of these other places. Another couple of organizations, or few organizations that are like this, are Stop Abusive and Violent Environments. Their URL is saveservices.org, and they publish a lot of, they analyze and republish and sort of post a ton of research in English and Spanish about domestic violence and gender symmetry and resources that are available and all of those kinds of things. They are active in sort of direct lobbying, which is something that you don't necessarily hear about in the news, and you don't necessarily know about it on YouTube or by word of mouth, but they are often sort of in Washington, D.C. actively, for 3 days in the Senate talking with U.S. senators. Another one is Women Against Paternity Fraud. It's womenagainstpaternityfraud.org. Right? One of the founding members is Diana Thompson, and she is yet another woman who finds herself on, in big government buildings talking to important people about these issues. And she was introduced, and her website, their website, Women Against Paternity Fraud, has resources like lists of attorneys and organizations, educational videos, all kinds of stuff, information on paternity fraud, and maybe what you can do about it. And she was actually introduced to me by Michael Parrott, who runs Victims of Immigration Fraud, which is sort of an informational and resource hub for people who got bit in the ass by the Violence Against Women Acts, the loopholes that they give to foreign nationals who marry U.S. citizens. In the U.S., if you're a foreign national and you marry a U.S. citizen, if you make an accusation of domestic violence, not only are you provided with all kinds of legal services for free and victim services for free and financial aid and all kinds of things like that, and your spouse can be just absolutely put through the ringer, but you also go on to the fast track to getting a green card and U.S. citizenship. So you get bumped to the front of the line if you make an accusation. And so, I mean, it's one of those things that's designed to help victims who are in a bad spot. If you're a foreign national and you married a U.S. citizen and you're living in the U.S. and he or she is being abusive, then these laws, this area of the law is designed to help you because you're marginalized. But of course, like most things, it's open to abuse by people who are really just using it in order to get citizenship and money. So there's that. And I'm not sure, I think that was it. I think that was all that I had. But those are the ones that I think a lot of the ones, NCFM, Victims of Immigration Fraud, Women Against Paternity Fraud, and Save Services, I think that they're often overlooked because they don't seem to have an internet presence as of yet.
I just wanted to interject really quickly and do a bit of shilling for Hannah, who sent me a message as she left. She has a recent post up on her blog, breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com, and she's doing a call out to anyone in our listener audience who has been assaulted and had their assault dismissed because of their gender or the gender of their perpetrator, and also has a Twitter account. To read it and respond to the request described in it. I'm pretty sure I know the request. There was a tweet going out for women who have experienced having their assault dismissed by the police, and of course the focus is always on women. We responded to the woman who was tweeting that and saying, well, why are you excluding men in this article? And she said, oh, I'm not, just tweet it too. And so the thing is that you need to go and if you are part of that profile, a man who's had your assault dismissed because of the gender of your perpetrator or the fact that you're a man, then go to Hannah's blog at breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com and follow the instructions at her latest post there. And does anybody else have any more resources to add?
Nope.
No? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
I'm just going to briefly shill one of the books that I really found interesting, not necessarily helpful, but definitely interesting. Esther Vilner's The Manipulated Man, which you can find on Amazon.com. It's a really good. It's a really
Esther Vilner.
Esther Vilner.
Not Vilner. Vilner.
Esther Vilner.
Yeah.
The Manipulated Man. You can find it on Amazon.com, and it's a really interesting, provocative read about how women maintain a control in society, not a political control, but a social control over men in order to use them as utilities. And it's got some interesting ways that lay that all out.
Yeah,
And
I would also recommend as a book Chinwaitsu's The Anatomy of Female Power. He was a Nigerian author who lived in a lot of different places.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard of that one. I'll have to take a look.
I think if you can't find it online because it's gone out of print and it's sort of really, really hard to find. And John the other was asking a year or so ago if there was anybody who could locate a copy so that he could actually scan it and put it up as a PDF. And somebody actually just sent him a PDF of it that was kicking around somewhere. So if you can't find it online, you can always ask John the other. He has offered to send it to anybody who requests it. And I think it's very, very worthwhile to do that.
If we're on the topic of books, if you're really new to men's issues and stuff, I always recommend Myth of Male Power. I think that was a book that really inspired me as well in the beginning. By Warren.
Yeah, that is a really excellent book.
Also,
Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell. I think it's Farrell with a. Is that with a PH or an F?
It's Farrell.
And incidentally, Warren Farrell has apparently expressed interest on coming on the show to Tom Golden if we do a show on boys.
Oh, that would be excellent. I'm gonna have I have to get in touch with Tom to do just like a chat like I did with Gad Sad on my channel. But if we can get both of them onto like a fireside chat or a show, or a radio show, that would be excellent because I think that they both have some really worthwhile things to say.
Yeah.
And you know, Warren is kind of he's kind of an iconic figure in all of this, and rightly so, I think. So.
All right. So Brian, are we ready?
Yeah. Karen, if you want to do the shilling, go for it.
I just nominated her. Do it.
I'm looking at the chat. It's like, let's get Karen to shill tonight. Shill, Karen.
Actually, you know what? One more thing I wanted to say about Esther Viller's book. If you guys are like on a crazy like budget and you can't like buy it or whatever, actually someone did a full reading of the entire book on YouTube. So you can actually search for The Manipulated Man on YouTube. It's like 6 hours long, and listen to the whole book if you really want to.
Yeah, I think that'll be my because I've read part of it, and but I just don't have time to read everything. My hands are busy a lot of the time, and the amount of reading that I have to do is already just with email and the amount of typing I have to do and stuff. If I read every book instead of finding some reading of it online, I would never, like, my house would be a complete fucking dump instead of half a dump. But Allison is like, oh, shill like the bitch you are, shill sexy. That's the request from the chat. All right, it's time for the e-begging. The e-begging. Send us the cash. Send us the cash because we are just. I'm just a poor Romanian. I'm poor. I'm poor, and I have this bird to feed. I have this stupid noisy bird to feed, and I have to get it a better cage. And the utility man and the rent man, they want their cash. So. Give us the cash. Send us the cash.
Send us the shekels.
The shekels. I need the shekels.
Okay, you can't do sexy.
Why would I do sexy?
Do like a sexy gypsy voice.
I'll do a sexy phone sex voice. And I'll ask you all. Just think about it. Think about how much time and effort and attention that all of us here at Honey Badger Radio put into this. Think about it. Think about it. Imagine it. And then send us what we need to continue what we're doing.
Dramatic pause.
I'm done. Everybody's
Okay.
just shocked.
Okay, alright, okay, www.patreon.com/HoneyBadgerRadio. I almost want to send myself, or us, money now. Send us, fuck.
You all got pounded in the butt by your own butt.
Yeah, I got pounded in the butt by my own butt.
Yeah.
We need some tingles.
Please say the patron in that voice, please.
Okay. www.patreon.com/HoneyBadgerRadio. Just give it to us. Just give it to us.
Holy fuck! I want to do that. I want to give you shit. I don't even have a penis, and I want to give it to you. All right, end this.